I'm joined today by Cori Lathan, who is a neuroscientist, technology pioneer, social advocate, serial entrepreneur. You have heard of nutraceuticals. You've heard of pharmaceuticals. But today we're going to learn about electroceuticals.
Yes.
What is an electroceutical?
Well, you actually gave a great intro because everyone has heard of a pharmaceutical, which is essentially taking a chemical for medicine, and it works with the natural chemistry of your body. Well, electroceuticals does the same thing, but with electricity. It puts electricity into your body and works with the natural electrical function of your body. Your body is chemical reactions, electrical reactions, and to act as medicine or wellness. So it's electricity as medicine.
So electricity and medicine, or electricity and people, has a mixed history, to say the least. How is this different from previous attempts to use electricity in medicine, or what's new here?
Yeah, I think where we were with electricity in the past, it almost reminds me of chemotherapy. I mean, where we are today, which is really just it's like throwing everything against the wall and seeing what'll stick. I mean, I think in the future we're going to look at chemotherapy the way we looked at maybe the overuse of electroconvulsive shock therapy or something like that. So I think there's problems with chemicals and chemotherapy today, and that has a long way to go. But the nice thing about electroceuticals and where the research is now is that we're really trying to hone in and hack the neurome. I'm stealing that from Martine Rothblatt from United Therapeutics. She thinks we can hack the neurome and figure out what electrical dosages we can give the body to actually cure different diseases or to work on wellness or other things.
Okay, you say cure different diseases. What are some of the diseases that are treatable by electricity? What are we finding new and different?
Yeah, so one of the most important paths that is ripe for electroceuticals is the vagus. It's the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the 12th cranial nerve. It's the largest nerve in the body. It's the superhighway of the body because it takes messages from your brain to every organ in your body and brings messages back again. And we can tap the vagus nerve, and specifically a really important path, the anti-inflammation reflex. And this is the path that goes from your brain to your spleen. And in the spleen, these electrical signals are converted into a chemical signal, the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, which tells nearby system immune cells to release a second chemical messenger, acetylcholine. And then acetylcholine binds to receptors that shut down the toxic tumor necrosis factor, or TNF, and other cytokine production that produces inflammation. Now, inflammation underlies pretty much all disease. I mean, that's not really an exaggeration, but we think of it particularly for autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, IBS, but it's also, vagus nerve stimulation has also been shown to affect things like obesity, migraines, depression, Alzheimer's even. So inflammation is sort of fundamental to disease. But what's really exciting about stimulating the anti-inflammatory reflex, and why I'm even more excited about it than curing disease, is that it could keep us healthy. So I've said for years that we have to shift from diagnosis and treatment to wellness and prevention. And that's really what keeping our body, using the vagus nerve and this inflammatory reflex to keep our body stable throughout life so that we don't develop these inflammatory diseases.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm sold. Vagus nerve, it's important. Getting rid of inflammation, that's important. And there's a lot of inflammatory diseases out there. And you talked about rheumatoid arthritis, but I guess There's asthma. There's lots of ones out there that can be addressed. COVID, for example, I've heard of that one. So, but you're talking about stimulating the vagus nerve, which I presume is somewhere back here or something. Does this mean you're putting electricity into a plug in your back, like the Matrix or something?
No, but that sounds like fun. No. The great thing about the vagus nerve, and this is an evolutionary anomaly, or I don't know if it's an anomaly, but no one really knows why. I think descendant from snakes, we actually have an auricular branch of the vagus nerve. So in other words, from the brainstem, a branch of the vagus nerve comes to the surface right at the Symbonca part of the ear. And that part of the ear is just above your auditory canal. So like if you stick your finger in your auditory canal so you can't hear me, you put your finger right above it and pull out the first finger, and that's your Symbonca, right there.
And this is a recent discovery, the Symbonca?
The inflammatory reflex is a recent discovery, but the fact that the Symbonca is important has been known for thousands of years. If you look at any acupuncture map, if you look at an acupuncture map of the ear, you will see that the Symbonca features heavily. So the importance of that auricular branch of the vagus nerve has been known for thousands of years, but it's really only been in the past decade that Dr. Kevin Tracy, from the president of the Feinstein Institute at Northwell Health, discovered this inflammatory reflex and the vagus and how to stimulate it through the auricular branch of the vagus nerve.
Okay, so does that mean you put a plug in your ear?
So how do you do it? So many people are very familiar with using electrical stimulation for muscles. Like if you go to a chiropractor or a physical therapist.
Oh, we got show and tell. This is great.
Yeah, show and tell. So you can buy a TENS unit on Amazon. What a TENS unit is doing is spreading electricity across a muscle for pain, and this is, a lot of people have experienced this. So most people know what it feels like to have electricity go into your muscle. It's a similar concept. I mean, this generates current, voltage, waveforms, but electroceuticals are not TENS units, okay? But this generates electricity. It's not new. We know how to do this. You can buy it off the shelf. It's safe. Now, imagine taking something like this that generates current, voltage, and some sort of waveform, and concentrating it into the vagus nerve, into the Symbonca. Well, my company, we actually have a new company called MyString, and we developed a prototype. This is a bench prototype, meaning it's not meant for clinical use. It's just a proof of concept. We said, hey, let's just take a regular headset. This happens to be a Beats headset. Not advertising or anything. I'm just saying, I just took a pretty expensive, nice headset, and I said, let's put some electrodes right into the earpiece. So now, when I just go to listen to my music, you can see there's two electrodes. You need a positive and a negative, so you need two. Now I go to listen to my music, and at the same time, I get some nice vagus nerve stimulation, which is not only anti-inflammatory, it also stimulates my parasympathetic nervous system. So it calms me. It's meditative.
And would it be done, how would you do this? At the beats of the music, or what is the frequency?
Yeah, so that's the super exciting part of the research. There's frequencies that would probably energize you, and there seem to be frequencies that could calm you. And there's probably patterns that are better for migraines, and there's probably patterns that are better for, for IBS. But we're kind of still in the chemotherapy stage where almost anything works. You put electricity into the vagus nerve, and inflammation goes down. And you can measure that through the blood levels, the cytokine levels. So if you look at the different studies that are out there, they all use different dosages. And in fact, some don't use electricity at all. Some use vibrotactile stimulation. So it's basically pressure. It's mechanical stimulation. And mechanical stimulation works, which implies that you could sit here and just rub it with your finger, and that works. Which
Interesting. Which goes back to the massage approach.
Yes.
But by applying the electricity, I guess that allows you to have much more control over the dosing or a rhythm or the timing.
Yep. And so my vision is to get this to thousands of people and sort of crowdsource, get people to opt into an experiment where we could crowdsource what is the best dosage for migraines, what's the best dosage for rheumatoid arthritis, what's the best dosage for depression. So to that end, this is the last part of show and tell. So I developed something a little more affordable and with the team and the folks at Northwell and Feinstein Institute. And so now we have something that's a little more distributable to the masses. And as you can see, it has 2 parts. This piece sits in your canal, auditory canal, and then this electrode sits at your Symbonca. And this is the little electrical pack, and it works Bluetooth to your phone. And we want to distribute these and get people using it and seeing how it makes them feel.
So I guess could you see a time when we have that device is hooked up to other devices, such as I have this Aura ring, which I wear,
Yes.
and tells me a fair amount of health information, more than the earlier versions of health monitoring devices did. But would you see that hooked up to a system like you were talking about? How would that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the data mining is going to be critical to figuring out the right dosages for each individual. I mean, we've talked about, it's really getting to precision medicine. What works for you is not what's going to work for me. And so I think combining your data, not only from your Oura Ring, but maybe from, the Apple Watch, I think that we're really going to be able to put together a signature that's very individualized.
How will that be differentiated from placebo effect?
Number one, I think placebo effect is great. If it works, let's go with it. I mean, the placebo effect is strong.
If the person feels better, fine.
Yeah, I mean, placebo effect is a very strong effect, very strong. So if it somehow has a placebo effect, good. But I think different than placebo effect. I mean, obviously there needs to be. The idea would be, here's sort of the vision. If we can collect data on a lot of people, we'll start to be able to separate the signal from the noise. And so let's say it emerges that we have a certain frequency and a certain current that seems to really emerge to help prevent migraines. Okay, well then you do the study, the controlled study, where you really have, you have placebo trial, and yes, I think then that's where it gets into medicine, right? When we're talking about wellness, it's a little bit harder because you're trying to prove a negative. You're trying to prove that people aren't getting sick. So there's kind of a continuum, but absolutely, we want to separate the signal from the noise and then do the proper studies to get there. And there's already many studies being done that have looked at blood levels. So even if you don't feel better, the cytokines are gone. So, which is worse, feeling better and the cytokines are still there, or not feeling better and the cytokines are gone. So, we're complicated. We're complicated beings. And I think the more data, back to your point about combining it with stress data and with heart rate data and respiration, all of these things, I think will be able us to optimize the individualized signatures.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. So the future of wellness is electricity.
Yes. Yes.
Electroceuticals. Thank you so much, Cori.
Thank you, Thomas.